Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for the June edition of ECGrid Presents. For those joining us for the first time, ECGrid Presents is a monthly webinar series featuring B2B industry experts speaking on various topics to help businesses refine their processes and move to that next level of supply chain efficiency and innovation. I'm your host, Linda Moore, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's presenter, RVCF supply chain consultant, Paula Giovannetti. Paula will share with us recent recommended improvements for EDI Ship Notices, as well as new business process guidelines for PO changes and item master data. This is your chance to engage with Paula directly and ask those burning questions. So please type them right into the Q&A located at the bottom of your Zoom screen anytime during the presentation. This session is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording as well as a copy of Paula's slide deck by email. And now, without further ado, over to you, Paula.
Thank you, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll start with a little bit about myself. I've been in retail for 30-some years, mostly supply chain and master data. For 25 of those, I participated in North American and international standards work, including the early 1990s when the Uniform Code Council Standards Maintenance Committee put together those original EDI implementation guides for every transaction set we use in retail. I moved to Minnesota about 18 years ago, and in that time, I've worked for Best Buy, Target, and Nestle Health Science. I retired in 2020. And Kim Zablocki, the founder of RVCF, gave me a call a couple of months later and said, "Paula, are you bored yet?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Good, I have some stuff for you to do." So I've been speaking at RVCF conferences for 24 years, and you may notice they're having their 25th anniversary. So somehow I missed the first one. But a little bit about RVCF, it's communication and collaboration between retailers, merchandise suppliers, and solution providers. We do things like have an open forum every month that just has retailers only or suppliers only. We recently started one for 3PLs. And so they get together amongst their peers and discuss what the issues are of the day. We create white papers, surveys, webinars, do benchmarking, and business process guides, which we'll talk about today. We have an annual conference in November in Scottsdale every year. So there are sessions and roundtables on current topics. There are one-on-one meetings so that a retailer can sit down with the supplier one-on-one and go through all the things that they need to talk about here. And they're very beneficial for both sides. It's a very popular event. This year, we'll have a 25th anniversary party. The old timers are coming in and we're going to tell stories. So we're really looking forward to that. The business process guide started a couple of years ago when several retailers came to Kim and said, you know, we really need the 856 ship notice and the shipping label to work, and it's not. And so the first thing we did was we did a survey and had an incredible and almost immediate response, which to me says the suppliers and the retailers felt the same way about getting it fixed. We had many more people than this, but they represented 79 suppliers and 20 retailers. We presented the findings for that survey at the fall conference that year, and we really identified a need for folks that needed a better understanding of just EDI basics. You know, what a functional acknowledgement does and what it doesn't do. The fact that the EDI translator, that function that the retailer uses to reject an EDI transaction, is the same function that's in the supplier system. So that in effect, those translators should be configured so that a sender of an EDI transaction set never sends a transaction that fails because they have the same mechanism on their end. We decided to create retail guides around a specific business process and digital communication, including EDI. So again, it's not on the PO change. We're not doing an EDI implementation guide on the 860 PO change. we're doing a business process guideline on the whole process of changing a purchase order. So quickly, just our role and standards is RVCF just helps trading partners find them, understand them, and use them. We follow, if we find something that we deem beneficial to the retail industry, then we'll follow the exact same change request process for X12 EDI or GS1 or GS1 US that any company would. We've recently worked with X12 to add 40 new error codes for the ship notice and the shipping label, and 3 new PO type codes, including one for ship to distribution center marked for store, the old SDQ PO, which as far as I know, we've been doing for a very long time, but retailers are using direct ship or drop ship, and then you have to look at the address to see if it's a distribution center to figure out it was an SDQ purchase order. And so we created a code just for that. Codes, and I'm not going to get technical on you, but there is a way, and it's a relatively new thing that X12 has put into play called an ISX EDI transaction wrapper that says there are transactions in this envelope that are from an older version, 4010, 4050, but we're going to use newer codes, more recent codes. So there's a way to do that, and you can go to x12.org to learn more about how that works. So the business process guidelines work group meets the third Wednesday, which means tomorrow, if anybody wants to join us. Everybody is welcome. You don't need to be a member of anything. You are welcome to participate in the work group. Pre-registration is needed so we can send you the meeting link. We do surveys. We meet monthly. That provides the content to the guidelines. And the most important thing is that they're written in business language. They're not technical. They're written so that those in business operations can talk to their own folks internally, including IT people and EDI people. They can talk to their trading partners and their solution providers. So we give them the terms and concepts they can use around these business processes to be able to have good discussions internally and externally. Everyone is welcome to the documents. Feel free to share them to anyone who might benefit. So that might be internal trading for new folks. It might be trading partner onboarding, or it might be for a company that's having a specific issue. So we built on the good work we did for ship notices, and our first business process guide was for error notification and error prevention, more importantly, and notification for EDI ship notices and labels. So again, notice this isn't an implementation guide for the 856 ship notice. This is specifically for the process of preventing errors and error notification. So here's part of the table of contents. I'm not going to read it to you. You'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. More importantly, just get a copy of the document because it's of course in there. But I'll call out a few things. We talk about the difference between technical errors and business errors because that can be confusing. We talk about the different methods for error notification. One would be an EDI 824 application advice, which is the EDI transaction that can be used for error notification for any transaction for any industry, not widely used in retail, especially not widely used for ship notices. We talked about the pros and cons of email, and it turns out it's not a bad way to communicate error notifications. It's already translated. It goes to individuals or to departments. You can have attachments. You can go through the thread and see what's been done and what's been discussed. So email works. What doesn't work is that error notification, that error report or spreadsheet that's attached, because for every retailer, they behave differently. Expectations are different. Terms are different. We use the same term to mean different things and different terms to mean the same thing. And so one of the big portions of all of our guidelines are the terms and concepts. So we can begin to use the same language. We talk about the nicknames that we use for things. There is a hefty section in here on barcode and label errors. So just really explains all you need to do to produce a high quality barcode and shipping label. And it also just so happens in the first guideline, there are a lot of EDI basics, again, written for those in business operations, but so that they understand things like control numbers and functional acknowledgements and how transaction is put together and so on. So that's the first guideline. Let's talk a little bit, for those of you who don't know, but I'm assuming most of you do, how a ship notice works, because when it works, it's magic. So we've got 100 cartons, and they all have the same thing in them. And on every one of those cartons is an individual serial shipping container code, a license plate. So we've got 100 cartons with the same G10 and 100 different serial numbers for each one of those cartons. It's in code. When that carton comes in, we also put that same serial shipping container code in an EDI 856 ship notice, also known as an ASN, because it's an advanced ship notice, meaning the electronic transaction has to get there before the truck does with the box on it, so that we can use it to receive. So you scan the box, you find it in the ship notice, you know everything you need to know about where it came from, who it was, the purchase order, the carton configurations, the G10s, the quantity, and so on, and you can automatically receive it, and it really works wonderfully. Except we did find 68 ways for it to go wrong. So we found these through the survey, the initial survey. What were your biggest issues? And then we took numerous retailers' error lists, fairly long lists, and yes, they are all very different on what they call things. And we homogenized that and put it in a spreadsheet in a matrix. And so here's just an example of it. The matrix is kind of in organic order. So here are errors for the ASN in general, and then at the shipment order pack item level, which is usually how an ASN reads. And then there's errors that pertain to the label itself and the carton itself. So just here's an example of, we've got a column with the type of error and the category of error. And then, so error name, PO number is duplicate. And then we do have a brief explanation, maybe a way to prevent it, maybe what causes it. You really want to go to the whole document, though, to get more information on each one of these errors and what causes them and how to prevent them and how to fix them. So here's PO number is duplicate. We explain it might happen if a retailer requires one ship notice per shipment and one shipment per purchase order with no back orders, which means there can only be, PO can only show up in a ship notice once. We do list the EDI segment and element if it's ASN related, so that you know where that attribute is in the transaction. And then what we did is we went back and made the 824 application advice whole. So the 68 things we found that could go wrong, 40 of them needed codes. So we went to X12 and got those 40 codes. So now you've got an 824 code and you've got the 824 description. And so if you wanted to use the 824 for ship notice error notification, you certainly could. Our intent, though, was to standardize the error names, and so that retailers could use them in whatever digital format they use for error notification. So I can imagine, and we don't expect everybody to go back and use the codes and the names that we invented. But what we could do is we could create a cross-reference list by taking this spreadsheet, and if the retailer would put a column on the right-hand side and just say, this is what we call it, or the supplier, and I know it's a lot of work, and make columns for every retailer and say, this is what retailer A calls this error, and retailer B and retailer C. But it would be work that's worth it, because once we do that, we've got a bucket of data that's got all of those errors harmonized, error codes harmonized, so we can pull and sort and select and aggregate and pivot and Power BI and analyze that data once it's all in the bucket. So we'll have bill of lading, ship to, ship from, the ship date, PO number, the standard carrier alpha code, so we know who the carrier is, D10 carton configuration category, all that information in a bucket, along with the error code for what went wrong with the ship notice or the label. And so now we can look for trends and patterns and get to root cause analysis. So for instance, if you've got labels that are failing, you might take a look at the data and you might say, it looks like a lot of the labels that fail for whatever retailer seem to be coming from this ship from the supplier's side. So maybe we should get somebody down there and clean the printers or get better label stock or whatever it is we need to do. Plus now you have the financial metrics to say, hey, it's worth it to go to this location and make sure those printers are up to snuff. If the data shows you that you've got failing shipping labels for a specific retailer, or maybe a specific retail ship to, or maybe via a certain carrier, you now again have the data that you need to sit down and have a conversation. If you've got labels that are failing for a certain product category or carton configuration, is it because you're overstuffing that box and the sides are bulging and the label is ripping off or smudging? Is it because with that carton configuration or size, you're putting the label in the wrong place? It's ending up too close to the edge and so on. But once you have this data, you can look for the trends and you can get to the bottom of what's going wrong. So the highlights from that first implementation guide is that obviously suppliers need to understand different retailers' requirements. Every other paragraph in the document says, make sure you understand how your retail trading partner does this. Because there are many ways that a retailer can certainly follow the standards and still do things differently because the standards allow for that kind of flexibility. So we have a supplier checklist on the end that the suppliers can go through. It says, make sure you understand how your retailers do these things. So an example might be, if a supplier is going to send a retailer a replacement because a ship notice failed, when they send that replacement, they're certainly going to use different control numbers. That's where we explain a little bit about how EDI works. But they may send the same shipment ID because it was the same shipment. They may send the ship notice type as standalone and original because that's the way the retailer wants it. There are other retailers who, when they get that document, will immediately reject it as a duplicate because they already have one of those. Because what they want is they want you to use the ASN type of duplicate or replace. So all ways that you can legally do it in standards, but different retailers do it differently, and the supplier needs to understand that. If they get an error notification from retailer A, is it just the first error they got to, or do they list all the errors? So all things the supplier needs to know. Excuse me, the retailer, and we talked about this, and they know it, and it's one of the issues is retailers need to provide meaningful, timely, actionable error notifications, but everybody's in such a hurry to move that box and get it where it needs to go, but they understand that they're going to have to stop long enough to identify what the issue was and communicate that to the suppliers. Not always easy to do. On the supplier side, they need to create a process for updating the ship notice when there are last minute changes. So it's not a panic, it's a process. So if there's a last minute PO change, if you pull inventory and there's damages or you're out of stock, what do you do to make that ship notice right and still get it out the door? Same for shipping labels, is how do you easily reprint a shipping label? So because it certainly may be true for the suppliers, that there are folks on the shipping line that watch labels go by them every day that are going to fail, and they could be trained or they may intuitively already know that there's something wrong with that label or the barcode, but don't feel that they can really pull that box off the line or stop the line and fix it. And so we need to explain to them, share with them that it's okay to replace a bad label with a good label. That's a good thing to take the time to do that. So that was the guideline on ship notices, and that led us to the next guideline on PO changes. So the PO change guideline follows the same MO. We did a survey, we met monthly. We list all the PO change processes, pros and cons. We include a list of terms. So we're all using the same terms to mean the same thing. That includes for different types of purchase orders and different types of purchase order changes. The matrix that we created includes the EDI codes often used by retailers for PO types, not always exactly the same, and for PO changes. The takeaways in that guideline were that the original purchase order process works pretty well. We have it automated, and it's been working for a while. Most preferred a complete PO replace to add changes and deletions at the line level or the quantity level. And so that might come in two flavors. That would be that the retailer would cancel a purchase order and send a new purchase order with a new purchase order number. It might be that the retailer will send a replaced purchase order using the same purchase order number, but it's a full replace. So for some suppliers, vetting a full PO replacement is a fairly automated process. But there were some retailers who still thought that if they were to cancel a PO or send a full replacement PO, they somehow go to the back of the line for product allocation. And many of the suppliers have fixed it so that's no longer true. So that a retailer could send a full replace on a purchase order and maintain the original allocation. So now the suppliers, or the retailers, I'm sorry, need to understand the supplier's capability on that. We did find that the EDI 860 PO change almost always has a manual component involved. It's emails, it's phone calls, it's a person reviewing what the change is for. And so we think that's why they haven't quite worked yet, and we wondered if there might be a better way just to do the PO change process. And those are the things we looked at with the full replacement. It would be beneficial, ECGrid, if there was a way, and of course there's a way, there's an API way, there's a put and get way to take that purchase order in the supplier system and the purchase order in the retailer system, use a little AI to compare the two, because by the time it's processed and in the supplier and retailer system, ERP system, they've called different things by different names and so on, but to use a little AI in the middle and compare those two and send a push notification to both the supplier and the retail when those two versions of the same purchase order don't match. So we felt that that would be very advantageous. We did discover that better synchronized master data for new items and location would result in fewer PO changes. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but incorrect master and location data is the second biggest reason for a PO change. So maybe the way we handle a PO change is to not have them if we could get the master data synced. So that's what led us to the next business process group. And that's the one we're working on now. We're about 4 months in, and we decided we'll do location next, but we wanted to just focus on item master data. And so it's item setup and attribute maintenance. Again, the survey showed that incorrect item master data is the second biggest reason for a PO change and a significant cause for ship notice failures. So we were surprised to learn that one of the biggest reasons for a ship notice error is carton configuration. So the supplier ships the right product and the right quantity of product, but not in the right carton configuration. So that would be how many in an inner pack, how many inner packs in a carton, or just how many in a carton. It goes to the supplier's minimum order quantity. It goes to the retailer's need to ship certain quantities to stores or wherever it's going next. And so for you EDI folks, that's that PO4 segment in the purchase order and in the ship notice, which explains the contents of that carton. And it was a major, major reason for failure for ship notices, and hard for the suppliers to understand because they felt like they shipped what they were supposed to ship. So that's all part of master data, that carton configuration, where it's going to ship from, minimum order quantities from the suppliers are all attributes we have for item master data. And then with the rollout of two-dimensional barcodes on the consumer package, complete and accurate item data is going to be critical for suppliers. The data is going to come from the supplier. So when the consumer scans that consumer package, the two-dimensional barcode, all of the data that somehow we feel compelled to know before we can buy something is going to be something they'll look for in that two-dimensional barcode, which of course will be used to go to the supplier's system. It's not all going to be in the QR code. I know a lot of people think QR codes hold a lot of information, so we're going to have a lot of information in the QR code, which is so far not true. There are some fun things we can do, expiration date, country of origin, bat lots, that sort of thing, that we can use for returns and recalls and so on. But there's most of the information is something that the system, the program, is going to look up in the supplier's database. So we can't have weight and package dimensions 9 filled. That's not going to work. That won't meet consumer and retailer expectations. So there's nowhere to hide once all that information is available on every consumer package in every retail location. So I tell suppliers they should be very excited and slightly terrified, because this is going to be very important for their brand and image to make sure that that data is accurate and it's present when the consumer is looking for it. So,
Hey, Paula, before you move on to the next slide, just a
yes.
quick reminder to anyone, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. We do have a question right now, Paula. You mentioned 2D barcodes. And
Yes.
the question is, can you speak more to the implications of the implementation of the 2D barcodes?
Not in 30 minutes. Absolutely. And again, you know, the standards have given us flexible ways to do that. So there's more than one way to do that. And so so just understand that. I know I'm working on, RVCF is working on a little frequently asked questions to so that folks basically understand what it is. The UPC is not going away, if that helps anybody start to breathe regularly. The UPC will be around for some time. In Europe, they're going a little bit faster than we are here with the two-dimensional barcode. Primarily, it's a QR code, but data matrix has already also been approved. But we can talk about QR codes because that's mostly what folks are using. The biggest thing I think, and we just did a white paper on it that we're going to release, is for those of you that are doing RFID and 2D on the package, QR codes on the consumer package, both require a serial number. Okay? RFID has to have a serial number because the RFID reader can't singulate and read and find products with RFID chips on it unless they all have an individual serial number on them. You know, if you want the right kid to come when you call, you got to give them all separate names. And so that's RFID, but because the chips are small, there's constraints. So it's numeric only data. It's, you know, below 300 billion. And it's basically a 12-digit number. For years, when we used serial numbers in barcodes, which we can do in other forms of barcode symbology, we've used alphanumeric serial numbers. There's a table that's been approved that even has some special characters in it. And so the guideline GS1 standards say every item's got one serial number for the life of the item. And so even if you don't plan on doing RFID or you're not doing RFID now, because I don't know how with any confidence we can say my product's never going to have an RFID chip on it. You need to look into, and you know what, Linda, when we send the PowerPoint out to everybody, I'll include this paper on serial numbers and two-dimensional barcodes. So it just means heads up, you know, understand the serial number before you go assigning. I think the hardest thing for everybody to manage is going to be that serial number management, because SAP doesn't have a spot for it right now. Most ERP systems, definitely not most product information managers, PIM systems, have a way to manage that serial number, and it's not nothing. It's what we're going to have to use to go get the rest of the data that we need. So to me, that would be the biggest heads up, because you're going to need to provide for it in your database. You're going to need to go get it when you need it. It's going to be a wonderful thing to have. You're going to be able to use it for recalls, for returns, for counterfeit, for theft, you know, just simple things like how do you get your stuff back when they've when they've been stolen and they've been recovered. And now you'll have serial numbers for every item that was stolen. So good thing. I'm not sure if that answered the questions. When we asked the asker if that was what they had in mind.
I think that was great, Paula. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And as it turns out, we made the decision to not make serial number one of the attributes in the item attribute business guideline. We're going to explain what they are and what they're for, but we're not going to go into depth, at least for this guideline, on item maintenance. So in the document, we discussed the pros and cons of different methods of exchanging item master data. We've got an EDI 832 price sales catalog, which has been brought up to date. It's got the attributes in it you need for today. And again, you can use the more current attributes in EDI, even though you're on an older version of EDI. There's a way to do that. So all of the good things that EDI brings you, you know you sent it, you know they got it, you know all the mandatory fields were filled in. The 832 has a way to sunset a product, say this is the first date it's available or the last date it's available. The most popular method for exchanging item information still is spreadsheets. Not the most populous. Let me try to explain that. More trading partners use spreadsheets than anything else, but much more data is exchanged using product catalogs because that's the relationship most of the larger suppliers and retailers have for exchanging item data. But spreadsheets are still around. They seem to be fashionable for new and for smaller companies. There are definitely some downsides to using a spreadsheet. It's a flat database. It's difficult to portray the hierarchical levels, the item pack and inner pack in a flat database. There really aren't many easy ways to validate the data when you put it in a spreadsheet. You do have to make spreadsheets for every product category, so you know which attributes you need for shoes and which attributes you need for towels. But it's still a popular method for exchanging information. And you do that through the retailer's vendor portals is a way to upload that. Vendor portals might also provide a way, heaven forbid, to key the information in, and that's still available. Product catalogs, what we used to call the old UPC catalogs, are still widely used again amongst larger trading partners. The global data synchronization data pools, it feels like have a little bit mind melded into the product catalogs and provide that sort of service. So those are the different methods we found for exchanging and updating. We have a big section in the guideline on the tools that are provided by GS1 and GS1 US. Oh my gosh, they have done the work. They have done the heavy lifting. There's a document out there called Apparel and General Merchandise Guide for Images and Attributes. And it has everything you need. It's got all the attributes and what they're called in an 832. So it's basically got the 832 mapped out if you want to use that. It's got standard spreadsheet templates if that's what you want to use. It explains global product classifications. It's a magnificent document, and our job really is just to let people know it's there and what's in it and how to use it. GS1 has always given us good ways for item attribute information. For instance, the G10 allocation rules when you assign a new G10 to an item, the package measurement rules, which I'm afraid not as many people know about as we need them to know about. Global product classification. So GS1 gives us a lot of those good guidelines for coming up with accurate item attributes. So like always, we'll define terms and concepts. And the biggest challenge we have, and this is a tough one. And the graphic down at the bottom is initially kind of fuzzy because I just need you to see the top green lines. So the survey question to the suppliers is, do you provide accurate data? And they mostly say, yeah, we do. And then when retailers get that exact same data, and we ask the retailers if they get accurate data, they say, yeah, no, not so much. So it has to be perception. The retailers do say it depends on the supplier, which of course it does. So is it the 80-20 rule? Do 20% of their suppliers cause 80% of the trouble? But we're never going to know any of that until we can measure it. And right now, I can't find the item attributes that retailers are measuring for accuracy other than package measurements, because they put them in a Cubiscan. And if the measurements aren't right, then they get back to the retailer supplier on that. But other than measurements, we're still looking for retailers who have a quantitative way to measure item data quality. And so that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Is let's list the core attributes, by whatever definition, the stuff we really have to have. Let's just start with those, and let's start to talk about what criteria we might use to measure the accuracy of that attribute. And so that's what we'll be working on. So if during the course of this conversation, you maybe were thinking, there's somebody internally or a trading partner or a solution provider I'd like to share this general information with, I wrote it up for you. So, obviously word it however you want, but here's just the highlights of the presentation if you want to communicate some of that to an associate. Let's see, the other thing I might want to mention is RVCF worked with AIM. It's a standards organization for RFID. And we created an RFID FAQ specifically for retail, again, in business language. Your neighbor should be able to understand it. And all of these documents are out in the resource section on the RVCF website. We are in the process of making an RFID FAQ for more technical questions. But if you do have any questions, just as a civilian, what is it? How does it work? Then you might be interested in that paper. Having nothing to do with business process guidance. So do we have any questions, Linda?
I do have one question here, starting with, do you have a projected date for releasing the item master data guidelines? I'm not sure if you mentioned a date.
No, our goal really is to wrap it up by the November conference, because that's one of the sessions we'll give is that new business process document. So we hope to have it wrapped up by then. If there's still too many open questions, we'll have a decision to make. It's a tough topic. So we hope by November. I thought what I'd do, if we've got some time left, is take a look at the error matrix. For those of you that were interested, can you see the error matrix?
Linda? Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So just to take a look at it in more detail, again, there's 68 line items here. And so we did things like we broke up missing and invalid. We decided we needed an error code. Missing was different than invalid, so we needed 2 error codes for that. But here's just an example of the shipment ID is missing. And there are numerous places in here that basically says that it's missing is an error you should never get, because that's one of those mandatory elements for an 856 ship notice. And on the supplier side, the EDI translator should always catch that and kick it back. So that really should be an error no one ever gets. They may get a duplicate error on that. And so again, here's the explanation about why that might happen and what you can do to fix it, and the EDI segment element that it's in. So again, here we've got information about the bill of lading, things that can go wrong with the package carrier or PO number, the standard carrier alpha code, and we go all the way down to things. There are a number of things that can go wrong with item quantity. So let me just go down to the bottom. Hope nobody gets dizzy. So these are all the errors that might happen just on error quantity. So we just call them out separately. So you could take a look at that and see all the differences between those. And then we've got some errors that can happen in the label and for the actual carton itself. That's that. The ASN checklist that we talked about that the supplier really needs to go through is, just contacts at the retailers, what their timing is. So how often they pick up, how often they process. And here's one, and it's one of the things I think we're going to talk about at the conference. And that is retailers have all this important information, their requirements about packaging and shipping and labeling and PO changes and delivery information, but they're not all in the same place in a document with the same name. So, I mean, we have some business rules that are embedded in EDI maps, and some of them are part of legal and some of them are, part of the initial discussion when a new supplier is brought on by a retailer. So the supplier really needs to know what the name of the document is and where it is for all this important information that they need to know, and they need to know when those things change. RVCF has a thing called the clearinghouse that suppliers automatically belong to when they join, and it'll push those changes to you for that. But then we need to talk about, just processes for ship notices and so on and so forth. So there's a list of all the things that retailers can do differently, and suppliers need to know how each retailer trading partner does it. So, and then here's just the document itself for error prevention and notification. No other questions?
There's just a note of gratitude to RVCF for your efforts towards quality data. I know it's extremely helpful to both retailers, vendors, and solution providers that help them succeed. Quickly, are these documents available to everyone on the RVCF website?
They are.
Paula, we can share the link.
The URL.
With everyone. Yep,
I'll send you the link. Yep.
Great. And then since we're sending out a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as your PDF, your slides, we'll provide that link as well. Well, thank you again so much, Paula, for sharing your expertise and all of that valuable information. And to everyone on the call, we appreciate you being here. We hope you learned lots. And of course, we hope to see you again for future installments of ECGrid Presents. Our next session is scheduled for Wednesday, August 13th. And those details too will be included in the email that you receive in the coming days with the link to the recording, the slides, and the RVCF website. If you have any additional questions or want to chat with anyone at ECGrid, please reach out anytime. info@ecgrid.com is the easiest way. And that's it for now. I wish you all a great rest of your day.